Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be listening to this podcast from. All right, I want to welcome you specially to the weekly podcast on the Priceless Value of Education. In the last two episodes, we have been focused on answering the question, what is primary about primary education? And of course, if you recall, I did tell you that it's an attempt to help parents, children, teachers, educators, and other relevant stakeholders understand the importance of the primary education in Nigeria. All right. So, looking at the goals of primary education and, of course, the manner in which these goals will be achieved, you would, of course, notice that they are well planned. All right. And they are well documented, from the objective of which includes the following, to, number one, inculcate permanent literacy and numeracy and the ability to communicate effectively. All right. Number two, to lay a sound basis for scientific and reflective thinking. All right, to mold the character and develop the attitude and morals in the child. All right, and also to develop in the child ability to adapt to the child's changing environment. All right, now these are some of the objectives. If you look at this very well, it seems to be well documented. All right, it seems to have a very sound foundation, of which means, if any child or any learner is given this this knowledge in terms of the ability to read and write, the ability to manipulate figures, all right, and communicate effectively, all right, if he's introduced to the basis for, thinking scientifically and also practicing reflective thinking, if the character of the learner is able to, you know, develop sound attitude and also to inculcate morals in them and also to help that child adapt to his, ever changing environment. If all of this is on ground, you would of course appreciate the objective and the intention for creating the primary education in Nigeria. But however, in recent years, all right, the primary education have suffered from poor implementation of these policies. It have suffered from, what I would want to describe as, you know, um, streaks of many factors, all right, which I would love to consider in today's episode. All right, I would love to walk us through a few of these factors that have led to the poor implementation of these policies, all right, and have led to the slow movement, all right, or steady decline in the development of primary education in Nigeria. All right, so it's going to be a very interesting one as usual. Okay, so what you can see on my screen, it's some of those factors. So let me begin by sharing the very first with you, which is overpopulation. All right, so overpopulation in Nigeria is one of the most profound challenge or one of the most profound factor that has led to poor implementation of this objective. Now, countries where populations of the people is regulated by government, such countries cannot effectively plan for the development and growth of her people. Now, what that means is that Nigeria is one of those countries where our population policy does not capture the number of children that should be given birth to per family. And what this have led to is, an outburst of, birth that cannot be controlled. So no doubt, Nigeria is already one of those countries. And there's no doubt, all right, that the population in Nigeria has already exploded. Now, if the population in Nigeria has already exploded, what that also means is that The educational facilities that is available at the primary level of education has been overstretched, and will not suffice for the number of learners or the number of children we have in the primary level of education. All right, it has been overstretched by the huge number of learners that would want to acquire basic education. Now, of course, what is most pathetic about the situation is that Nigeria as a country has no population policy that would limit birth. Even our tradition has not also helped so well. All right, our tradition in a way and in part has encouraged, uncontrolled birth of children that cannot be provided for. So Nigeria again is that country where couples can give birth to the way can give birth to can give birth to children the way they want to do. All right, and the population of Nigeria, as you know, it's increasing on a daily basis because of this very factor. All right, this increase in the population of Nigeria has affected all sectors of the economy, but specifically has affected the educational sector. All right, because at the point of planning and at the point of implementation of planned policy, you would always understand that there would always be an underestimation of the facilities that should be provided to the number of children available in school. Because, of course, if the birth rates keep increasing, all right, you would also realize that regardless of what educational facility is provided, it will always be insufficient. All right, it will always be information insufficient. Why? Even the statistics that is used to arrive at the number of people we have in Nigeria, or the population figure we have in Nigeria, will not be accurate. All right, this is because there is already, a deficiency in our population policy. All right, so and this is really one of the most troubling factor that has affected the development of primary education in Nigeria. All right, now the second one is equally important, and this is the abolition of Teachers Training College, which is formerly called a TC2. All right, TC2, the abolition of Teachers Training College. Now, you would understand that prior to now, there used to be this teachers training college, all right, where those who are part of the teaching and learning process called teachers are expected to go through. Having gone through the teachers training college, all right, they can now proceed to obtaining their NCE from the Nigeria College of Education. All right. But however, after the abolition of the Teachers Training College, what we have now seen is that the NCE has now been made the minimum teaching qualification. Now, if you do a comparison of who you know teachers who were trained with the teachers during the teachers training college before proceeding to college of education for their NCE program, all right, in those days, and the present teachers who we now have, who of course pass through the college of education, or even some directly to the university for an educational program, BEd, you would understand that the difference is clear. All right, the difference is really clear. Now, what we need to understand here is that if we say primary education is a foundation for learners learning, all right, if we say primary education is that foundation upon which other levels of education is built upon, if we understand that whatever happens to the primary education, all right, either positive or otherwise, will also have a significant effect on other levels of education in the same direction. All right, we will now understand that by this development, teachers that are supposed to be recruited to teach at the primary school level should also have undergone, foundational training at the teachers training college. And now this is one of the factors that of course have led to you know has led to the steady decline in the development of the primary level of education, because what we now have is have big teachers who don't really understand or who don't really possess the qualities of a good teacher. All right. Now to top on that is the next factor, and that is a shortage of qualified teachers. Now, when I mean qualified teachers, I'm not talking about the quantity of teachers. Rather, I'm talking about the value of that very teacher. Now, this is it. In terms of quality, there's no doubt there are many teachers in the primary schools. Many teachers. We're not lacking of teachers. In fact, there's never been a time where Nigeria was ever lacking, or where any of the levels of education was ever lacking of teachers. But what we are always lacking of, and what will continually be lacking of, is the presence of qualified teachers. All right, qualified teachers. Now, in terms of quality, there are many teachers, like I earlier noted, in the primary school, but in terms of quality, there are a few teachers in the public primary school. Now, teaching profession has been regarded as at least the profession where all manner of graduates, irrespective of their discipline, can go into and secure employment. Now, this is both good and bad. It is good because, of course, there's an opening in the public primary schools. All right, there's always going to be an opening in the educational sector, specifically in primary schools, that opens open his arm to receive all forms of graduates. All right, what that means is that regardless of your discipline, you can always come into the public primary school and you are employed. However, at the other side of this is that we are now recruiting people who, number one, are not qualified by certification to be called teachers. All right. In fact, to the recent policy of government, more than 70% of the members of NYC, the National Youth Service Corps members, all right, on a yearly basis are mobilized and posted to public primary and secondary school to teach. Now, it is obvious that most of them are not qualified. It is obvious that most of them don't even have the rudiments of teaching. All right. They don't even possess, some of the prerequisites of being called a good teacher. They have not received the foundation. They don't have the training. But we have a system that forces them to go into the public primary school again, to now transfer knowledge to our precious young kids. All right. And even though some of these NYC members did not go through this educational foundation, they didn't have, or they don't possess the educational qualification, or even have an experience, and some of them might be, of course, genuinely interested in the teaching profession, but that does not translate into this does not really translate to them being an effective teacher. All right, so we have to create a balance. Whereby teachers or teachers who are not qualified by certification, who are coming into the public primary school, there have to be a system where they are trained, all right, where they are groomed, so that when we now take them, in addition to the already qualified teachers, we can have a beautiful teaching and learning process. But whereby we have 70% of the NYC core members coming to the public school who don't possess, the required characteristics of the teacher, our primary education will definitely suffer, because what we've done now, we've now left the responsibility of teaching into the hands of people who don't know, who don't understand how to transfer knowledge into the learners. And that is you know one problem that has led to the steady decline of the development of primary education in Nigeria. Now, the fourth point is also similar, all right, and that is weak process of recruiting teachers. Weak process. Now, in some states of the federation, there's this trend of man no man that's permeated the whole sector. All right. Now, this is done on the basis of um, who I know who works in government, who I know who is a member of the parliament, who I know who might be a senator that can recommend me for that very teaching position. So it is no longer on the basis of your criterias. It is no longer on the basis of your qualification or your certification or more to say your experience. It is now on the basis, recruitment is now on the basis of, oh, I know somebody who works in a government who can recommend me to, who can recommend for the job of a teacher or for the position of becoming a head teacher or whatever. Now, this has led to the decadence of our primary level of education. Now, during this recruitment process, politicians, so to say, and I say this respectfully speaking, hijack the process and employ whoever they want to employ. All right. In most cases, this recruitment, like I've earlier said, is no longer based on merit, especially at the state level. And now, this is a wrong signal to the development of primary education in Nigeria. We have to get it right. All right. We have to get it right if we want to, fully achieve and realize the goals of the primary level of education, all right, which involves to inculcate literacy, numeracy, and the ability to communicate effectively in these learners, all right, we must get it right from the stage of recruiting. All right, we must have a system that thoroughly checkmate the criterias or the qualification or the qualities of these teachers that will be employed into the system, and in turn we inculcate knowledge to our learners. Now, the fifth point is something none of us should be new to. All right, there is a lack or insufficiency of instructional materials. Now, if you remember from our earliest introduction into this very episode on what is primary about primary education, you realize that part of the policies that was laid down by the government to ensure that the goals and the objective of primary education is efficiently realized is that primary schools or the teachings that happen in primary schools or in classroom, right, must be practical, must be exploratory, and must be experimental. Meaning the teaching method that happens in the class or the teaching method that is used to transfer knowledge to the learners must be exploratory, all right, must be very practical, and must be experimental. However, majority of the instructional materials that will enable teachers to present these teachings, all right, in a more experimental manner are really insufficient in majority of our public schools, in majority of our public primary schools. All right. And now instructional materials are those teaching materials that should assist teachers to deliver their lesson in a clear and in a more interesting manner. All right. But hence, we are now lacking, or hence, there is an insufficiency of these teaching materials or these instructional materials. There's no way the primary level of education will achieve those objectives. All right. For example, talking about the ability to inculcate numeracy, the ability to manipulate figures, all right, or the ability to for a child to do some basic arithmetic operation. You have to understand that certain instructional materials are integral to that very process. All right, there's a need for flip charts. There's a need for other forms of teaching aid that would be able to clearly explain the process of addition. All right, that will be able to explain multiplication, division, and subtraction to a child without necessarily writing on the board. All right. And if we have this in place, the learner would be able to, of course, learn the act or learn the basics of numeracy. And as he grows on, is able to pick on complex arithmetic operation. I always want to give you my story how that, during my primary school, my secondary school, I wasn't really, I wasn't really given that very strong foundation into mathematical calculations or operation, and this affected me. When I will eventually find myself in the higher institution, it affected me because of course I don't have a strong foundation in all of this. And now this can be the story for many others, many undergraduates currently going through life in their respective higher institution. Because if we miss it at the primary level, we would definitely miss it at other level. All right. And now, lastly, the last point, which is also very interesting and equally important for our discourse, is the controversy over the management of primary education. Now, following the adoption of the 1979 Constitution, the federal government, of course, seized the direct management of primary education. All right. With the 1979 Constitution, the management of primary education was now placed into the hands of the local government through the instrumentality of, the Universal Basic Education Commission, UBEC, and also the State Universal Basic Education Board, SUBEB. And now, of course, the Local Government Education Authority, LGEA. However, in practical, it is the SUBEB through the LGA that manage the primary school without little or no consultation to the local government council. And now this is where the confusion between state and local government over the management of primary education comes in. Now, it is the duty of the local government council to manage and to also finance primary education. However, in part, the local government council have equally argued that it is the duty of the state and the local government itself to manage and finance primary education in Nigeria. Now, with this controversy, the primary education has suffered significant setback in terms of development, because we can't really say, okay, this is the council or this is the body that manage primary education. In other words, it's left to the hands of no one. There have always been a debate if it's between the state or the local government council, or if it should be in the hands of the state through the instrumentality of UBEB and SUBEB. There is no clear definition of who is responsible for the financing or who is responsible for the management of primary education. And of course, because we have this controversy going on, we cannot experience, that height of development we want. Now, these are the 6 factors that has led to, the steady underdevelopment of the primary education in Nigeria. I would like to know which of these factors resonate with you more. I would love to know if you think there are more factors that has, contributed of um, to the underdevelopment of primary education in Nigeria. And until next time, my name is Arise Michael Godfrey, and I'm your friend. In the next section, we're going to be talking about the possible solutions to address some of these factors, and how we can now take primary education from this level to the next level. And until next time, my name is Arise Michael Godfrey, and keep subscribing and keep listening to the podcast on the priceless value of education. Thank you.